"Get out of the car now, you filthy black bitch. Resisting arrest, huh? You dared to act tough and lay hands on me last time. There are witnesses. Don't even think about denying it," Ryan Cole screamed. His face flushed red, yanking Maya Bennett's collar violently. The notoriously corrupt and racist cop threw out fabricated charges: traffic violation, assault, drug possession. On the scorching hot street of Millfield, Nathaniel, a SEAL operative faces a life-or-death battle against scum and a system that hides the truth. Where are you from? Any hot drama happening? Drop a comment. The black military SUV rolled quietly along the road leading into Millfield, its windows coated with a pale red dust from the long drive. Through the windshield, a rusted sign reading "Welcome to Millfield" tilted against an old wooden post, offering a welcome devoid of warmth. Maya Bennett eased off the gas, her gaze dimming. She had passed countless gates and war zones from Fallujah to Kandahar, yet this one, though devoid of gunfire, weighed heavier than body armor on her chest. Maya prayed, "How can I ever wake up weighed heavier than body armor on her chest?" The leather seat stuck to her back after hours of driving, but Maya didn't complain. Silence was a discipline she had mastered since 20, when she first stepped into a special operations unit. Today, she returned not as a SEAL, but as a woman coming home to where she once grew up. The only reason she still had to return was Evelyn's house, her elderly foster mother still living in the southern end of town. The rest of Millfield felt like an abandoned scrapbook. It had a name, but no heart. Her eyes swept along the roadside. Wilson's once buzzy barber shop now bore a "for sale" sign. The old church that once hosted town events was covered in moss, its steps chipped and crumbling. Lucy's Diner, famous for Evelyn's apple pie, had long since closed. Maya tightened her grip on the steering wheel, feeling a creeping chill settle into her palm. At the town's only red light, she glanced out the window. A middle-aged man in a worn baseball cap stared at her before quickly looking away, pretending not to notice. A group of teens pedaled past, their chatter fading as they caught sight of the unfamiliar vehicle. Maya recognized that look, cautious, distant. They didn't know her, but her skin color and military plate seemed more than enough to trigger suspicion. The weight in her chest didn't come solely from their eyes. It came from memory. At 14, during PE class at Millfield High, a teacher had asked in front of everyone, "Are you sure you should be in the advanced class, Bennett? The coursework might be a bit much for someone like you, someone like you." From that day on, Maya knew everything in Millfield came with invisible boundaries, and she was always on the outside of them. The SUV turned into the southern neighborhood. Faded white fences surrounded aging homes. A police cruiser passed in the opposite direction, and Maya noticed the driver glance back over his shoulder, suspicion in his eyes. Her training kicked in. The patrol patterns, watchful gazes, and cautious body language all told her something was rotting beneath the town's calm surface. A small convenience store glowed dimly under scattered neon lights. A boy around 8 stepped out with his mother, froze at the sight of her vehicle, then tugged his mother's arm and quickened his pace. Maya exhaled softly. She had braced herself for hostility, but hadn't expected Millfield to feel this cold after all these years. At the final turn before Evelyn's block, red and blue lights suddenly flickered in the rearview mirror. Maya didn't look back. Her hand slipped from the wheel and rested calmly on her thigh, thumb brushing the small recorder hidden beneath the gear shift. Her reflection in the mirror was composed, still, ready. "He begins." The window rolled down just a few inches before the voice cut through the air ahead of the wind. "Hello, ma'am. Your rear light looks a little dim. Could be the dust, or maybe a burnt-out bulb." The man beside the car leaned in, one hand on the door frame, eyes scanning sideways rather than directly. The badge on his chest read, "Millfield Police Department of Officer, Cole." Maya turned to him, gaze alert and unreadable. She pulled a leather wallet from the side compartment and handed over both her military ID and vehicle registration. "All documents are valid, plates are registered, vehicle is under military management." Her voice was steady, neither guarded nor emotional. Cole took the papers, but didn't check them right away. He leaned further in, eyes roaming the interior. "Where you headed this late, Bennett? Back to the old house? Or just road tripping through states?" His words were casual, but his tone hinted at mockery and scrutiny. Maya remained motionless, hands still on the wheel. Visiting someone? A personal trip? Cole glanced at her ID again. SEAL, huh? Strange how someone in the military just shows up without notifying local law enforcement. Around here, we like to know who passes through our land. His tone suggested she was more intruder than returning local. Maya didn't respond immediately. She locked eyes with him, just long enough to thicken the air. Do you usually stop military registered vehicles with working lights in the correct lane? Cole smirked lazily, unable to hide his irritation. There's been a few unfamiliar cars lately. My job is to keep Millfield safe. He pulled a radio from his belt, fumbled with the channels, then looked back at her like weighing his next move. Maya studied his behavior, the unnatural movements, the extra silence between his lines. Cole didn't care about safety. He was asserting dominance, and she knew men like that. When they weren't acknowledged from the first glance, they'd find ways to provoke until they were. Are you from around here? He asked suddenly. I was, Maya replied curtly, eyes locked on his. Cole nodded and walked a slow circle around the SUV, tapping a finger against the rear light. Yeah, still working, but your right mirror's cracked. Better replace it. Maya tilted her head, gaze deliberate. That mirror had a hairline crack, but it didn't impair function. A minor detail, one not worth stopping a car for unless it was about who she was or who he thought she was. Stay within the law next time. I'll let this slide, Cole said as he returned her documents, his sneer intact. Maya accepted them with a slight nod. No thank you. She restarted the engine and rolled forward. In the rearview mirror, Cole still stood in the road, eyes fixed on her, hand resting idly on his radio. Her left hand remained near the gear shift, finger gently brushing the tiny recording device tucked against it. A faint beep echoed in the silence, confirming the file had saved. Millfield, you haven't changed, she thought. But this time, she wasn't the silent 18-year-old who left. She was the woman who came back, with every reason not to bow to anyone. The SUV had barely moved a few hundred meters when red and blue lights flashed again, this time from the side. Another patrol car burst out from a tree-shrouded intersection, blocking Maya's vehicle. She slammed on the brakes, her body leaning forward slightly while both hands stayed firmly on the wheel. The headlights shone straight into her windshield, forcing her to squint. To her right, Ryan Cole's car also arrived, parking diagonally behind hers as if on cue. The doors opened simultaneously. A female officer stepped out from the passenger seat, holding a baton, clad in tight armor, her eyes void of any warning or courtesy. Ryan Cole approached the driver's side, knocked twice on the glass, harder this time, and without a smile. Maya lowered her window, silent. Get out of the car, now, Cole ordered, voice dry and abrupt. For what reason? She asked evenly. Resisting arrest. You showed a defiant attitude and physical contact during the last inspection. There are witnesses. Maya did not react, her gaze cold as she held his stare for exactly 2 seconds before opening the door and stepping out. She understood the inspection phase was over. This was the beginning of the show. The female officer approached from behind. No one read her rights. No paperwork was presented. Maya stood still, hands lowered to her sides, showing no resistance, but when her wrists were grabbed roughly behind her back and the handcuffs snapped shut with a sharp click, she realized this had crossed beyond mere intimidation. Cole shoved her toward the patrol car, bending her over the hood. Her neck tilted to one side, her left cheek pressed against the cold metal. The pressure was not heavy, but enough for the edge of the side window to scrape along her cheek, leaving a long scratch. Blood did not flow freely, but it oozed steadily down her cheekbone, dripping onto her shirt collar. Another officer opened the rear door. Maya was pushed inside, her head bumping lightly against the car frame. The door slammed shut, the electronic lock beeped immediately afterward. She sat upright, hands cuffed behind her, blood on her cheek, eyes staring through the foggy mesh window. A radio near the dashboard emitted static noise from the internal system, but she heard nothing beyond the steady beat of her heart, each thump as clear as a marching drum. She said nothing, did not struggle or ask questions. Inside her mind, an automatic process began, like a reflex. She registered her location, start time, travel duration, uniform colors, weapons on each officer's belt, the steering wheel structure, even the faint scent of antiseptic from the front seat. She noticed the seat had previously been occupied by an injured person. The old bloodstains still speckled the leather trim. This was not a mistaken arrest. This was a mission designed to neutralize her, and if she did not handle it properly, the next step would be more than just charges. The police station appeared, a silent, gray-white concrete block under dim light. The car stopped. Cole stepped out first and signaled officers at the gate. When Maya was pulled out of the vehicle, he spoke loudly into his radio. "Subject checked. Highly organized suspicion. Mark subject as dangerous. Coordinate heavy force." Maya was led down the main hallway. Every step echoed heavily, weighing down the atmosphere. Eyes followed her from the reception, open offices, behind frosted glass. Some raised eyebrows, others smiled, a smile far too natural, as if they had been briefed about her, as if she had been shaped into a figure before she even left the car. When taken into the holding cell, Maya looked up directly at the ceiling-mounted camera. The indicator light was off. The machine was not recording. She knew the true silence phase had just begun. The steel door shut behind her with a harsh click. She stood still in a roughly 3-meter square cell. Concrete walls peeling, gray stone floor stained with damp patches, and a faint smell of bleach that hinted at a cursory cleaning. A yellow bulb fixed to the ceiling cast a dim glow, lighting only the front half of the cell, leaving the rest in shadow. The camera, mounted slightly to the left, lazily faced the door, not covering the entire room. She leaned her back against the wall, tilting her head slightly to keep her left cheek from direct contact with the rough surface. The tear from when she was shoved into the car still stung. Dried blood formed a hardened streak. No questions were asked, no documents read. Cole did not return. No doctor, no intake form, only the steady sound of footsteps marching down the corridor outside. A faint scraping of a door was heard. The guard slid in a food tray through the iron slit. The aluminum tray was bent, the rice bowl half empty, the clear liquid in a lidless plastic cup. The guard sneered through the bars, his voice half mocking. "We don't take kindly to mercenaries coming back here showing off. Eat up. Keep your strength." The sliding door slammed shut. Footsteps retreated as if they had never been there. Hours later, a female staff member passed by. As she neared the bars, she bent down as if inspecting something, then suddenly nudged Maya's leg lightly with her knee, her eyes flashing quickly past. "Think you're all that, huh?" she hissed through clenched teeth, quiet enough that only Maya heard. No reaction followed. Maya remained seated, eyes calm like still water. No frown, no retreat. But inside, every detail was logged, marked like a point on a tactical map. She began to map the police station in her mind. The hallway layout, patrol rhythms, shift changes, camera locations, individuals' behaviors. The guard nearly always smoked during a shift. The female staff passed the cell only on odd hours. The corridor lights dimmed at night. Seemingly meaningless sounds, the lock clicks, corridor bells, static from the surveillance room radio, became signals. Maya calculated as if planning a retreat from an ambush point. This was not temporary detention. It was control. Erasure of traces. Constructing a scenario for an accident to happen. She had seen this pattern repeat many times on overseas missions. She named it internally. Framing, isolating, destroying evidence, internal handling. All without a single bullet fired. Only power and a few gestures. Maya was not surprised, but she would not lie down to be decided. A cold breeze whispered through the door crack, carrying dampness from the hall. The overhead light flickered and dimmed to half. Darkness crept forward, swallowing the rear of the cell. She shifted her weight, leaned back against the wall, hands folded neatly on her lap. Her eyes focused on the steel door. The figure stopped outside the bars, standing still. No movement, no sound, just watching. Maya's eyes remained fixed, unblinking. The silence stretched long enough to know the figure was not passing by. A probe, or a signal. She felt the breath of this game turn. Inside her mind, a plan slowly took shape. It would not start with resistance, but with patience. Like every true battle, victory did not come from strength, but from knowing where you stood, who watched, and which weak point would break first. A video under 2 minutes long began circulating on a Millfield community forum. Posted from an anonymous account, the clip captured the entire scene of Maya's arrest from the perspective of a car behind her. The dashcam recorded her SUV being boxed in by a police vehicle, flashing lights, and the moment Ryan Cole approached her window with a harsh tone and clearly overpowering demeanor. What drew the most attention was the partially recovered audio from a body cam. The uploader filtered the sound to isolate Cole's words, "I don't need a reason here. I am the law." His voice rose amid murmurs of protest before fading into the tense atmosphere the footage conveyed. Maya remained silent, her face reflected in the window calm and unshaken, contrasting sharply with how she was treated, as if she were an armed threat. And within hours, the clip was widely shared by other users, sparking a flood of questions on local social media. Who is she? Why was she arrested? Was there a warrant? A small group of racial justice activists from the neighboring district stepped in, calling for an investigation. What had been a tightly controlled matter within the Millfield station was now leaking through every crack of the Citizen News network. Inside the police station, the atmosphere shifted. Ryan Cole threw his personal phone onto the desk after watching the viral clip. He summoned 3 guards to a back meeting room, his voice low and hoarse, no longer mocking as usual. Who leaked this? No one answered. Cole's tone hardened. From now on, personal phones stay in the locker. Anyone leaves without reporting, consider them gone from the station forever. After the meeting, Cole entered his office, locked the door, and dialed a private number. He spoke briefly. "She's starting to draw attention. Handle it before the local news sniff around." The reply was delayed, then a cold male voice came through. "Someone's already on it." In the holding cell, Maya sensed every subtle change in the station like a hunter listening for rustling leaves. The shift was swapped early. The usually curt guard was unusually silent, eyes flicking past her, carrying a heavy undertone. Sometimes the corridor door opened and closed without reason. She began counting footsteps, noting discrepancies with the shift times. Her breath slowed as she sat quietly on the cold stone bench, staring at the opposite wall. A fresh scent of disinfectant drifted through the door crack, sharp, more like cleaning away something than routine sterilization. She knew that smell well, from field hospitals and conflict zones. Without being told, her body switched to alert mode. The hallway light flickered unevenly. Each time, the shadows cast through the bars shifted too. This time, the light didn't blink. It glowed steadily, harsh and unnatural. Maya moved close to the door and quietly looked up at the camera mounted high. The angle was tilted. A gray tape barely covered the lens, freshly applied. She stood still, one hand lightly resting on the iron door, her breathing steady but her pupils narrowed instinctively. Silence grew outside, as if a decision had been made and the stage was being cleared. In Maya's mind, every sense was taut as a string. Tonight's atmosphere was too clean to be healthy, too quiet to be safe. A metallic click echoed in the dark. Maya's eyes snapped open as the door bolt turned. The hallway light spilled through the bars, illuminating a staggering figure pushed into the cell. A tall, gaunt man with bruised, blotchy face wore a torn, collarless shirt, stained at the hem. 2 officers escorted him, opened the door, shoved him inside, and quickly left. "No room in the other cells," one said shortly, not looking at Maya. The door shut, locking immediately. The stranger collapsed in the corner, leaning against the wall, nodding as if drunk. His breathing was heavy, but without alcohol smell. Maya sat up, eyes fixed on him. In a jail like this, cell sharing at night was rare, even stranger when the new inmate showed signs of training. He wasn't asleep. His eyes darted in the dark, hands hidden beneath the shirt, posture slightly leaning forward but not slumped. His right hand had a calloused patch at the thumb base, sign of someone who'd held a gun for years. His walk into the cell was steady, despite the stagger. Maya stayed still, but her mind readied for any scenario. She pretended to lie down, but her right hand stayed close to her thigh, palm open, ready to lock joints. Half the hallway light went out. The room slipped into a dim shadow, enough to conceal quick movements. In a flash, the man sprang up. The attack was soundless, hands striking like a snake. A paracord tightened around Maya's neck, dragging her back against the wall, arm pinned across her shoulders. She reacted instantly, elbow snapped back, heel planted, shifting weight forward to break the hold. The cord still wound tight, but its force diminished. She twisted her hips, sliding past half his body, then rammed her shoulder hard into his left ribs. A low grunt escaped, and the man stepped back exactly 1 pace. Maya twisted in the narrow space, hooking her leg behind his knee and sweeping sharply. He lost balance, and before he could turn, her elbow crashed into his nose. Within seconds, he lay motionless, back pressed to the floor, face turned sideways, blood soaking his collar. Maya held him locked down, breathing hard but eyes steady. "Guard!" she shouted. "Attack in cell 9. Call medical." No reply. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Silence. The hallway light flickered on after nearly a minute. 2 officers appeared, not rushing, weapons holstered. They looked at Maya, then at the man on the floor, seemingly debating which version to believe. One checked his pulse. "Alive," he said indifferently. "Probably agitated." "He's not drunk," Maya said, eyes locked on the other. "He had a paracord hidden under his shirt." The officer said nothing. Then he dragged the attacker up, placed him on a stretcher without explanation. No one asked if Maya was hurt, no report requested. Everything was cleared away, like a stain on a clean floor, wiped before anyone else saw. The door shut. Maya sank back into the corner, the red mark on her neck still burning. Her chest rose and fell, eyes brighter than before. All doubts were now as clear as a palm print. This was no accident, no random troublemaker. She had just survived a carefully disguised death sentence, and someone in this system was desperate because she was still alive. Under the faint light filtering through the iron-barred window, Maya opened her eyes. Her neck ached painfully, swallowing, tightening an invisible noose further. The dark bruise along her jawline, marked like a small map, traced the life-or-death moments from the previous night. No doctor, no report. Only a cold, blunt note slipped through the bars. "You will soon have legal counsel." The words were as stark and emotionless as the prison walls. She sat up, pulling the blanket close to her back, eyes fixed, unwavering. A part of her instinct sensed this was a planned development. When fists fail, pens take over, and sometimes ink can suffocate more than blows. The door opened, and a middle-aged man entered the visitation room. His suit was wrinkled, tie loose, and his briefcase edges worn. He neither smiled nor shook hands. "I'm your public defender. Let's keep this brief. I have 2 other cases this afternoon." His voice was weary, each word dropping heavily. He didn't ask how Maya felt, nor mention the recent assault. Flipping through a thin file, he skimmed a few lines, underlining them with a pen running dry, then looked up. "This case could end quickly if you cooperate. Admit some fault, acknowledge you were stressed, and behaved improperly toward the police. The court will consider leniency." Maya didn't answer right away. She studied him long, as if reading the essence of his character in his face. Finally, she asked slowly, "Have you read the entire file? Or are you just here to repeat what they want you to tell me?" The man hesitated briefly, then avoided her gaze. "I'm trying to help you find a way out. Fighting this system won't get you anywhere, believe me." A quiet breath passed. Maya bowed her head as if weighing her options, then raised it with cold, steady eyes. "I don't need a mouthpiece. I need a warrior." Her words were soft but sharp as a dagger. The public defender froze, packed his documents, stood, and left without another word. That afternoon, Maya requested paper and pen. She wrote a formal appeal for legal representation from the Department of Defense, attaching a detailed statement from the moment she was first stopped to the night of the attack. Each letter was slow and deliberate, strokes like carvings. When the prison officer asked, "Why the request for a change?" she answered firmly, "Because I'm about to fight back, and I don't need anyone blocking my way." The officer paused a moment, then silently nodded and walked away. Leaning against the wall, eyes closed, Maya relaxed for the first time in days. She knew the real battle had finally begun. The next morning, when Maya submitted her request for legal representation from the Department of Defense, the officer receiving the file handled it cautiously between two fingers, eyes betraying vigilance. She felt the atmosphere shift inside the prison. No one spoke openly, but every small action seemed recalibrated. Meal trays arrived late, guards in different looks turned probing, and personal items in her cell were searched without explanation. Isolation began subtly. Books she had borrowed disappeared. Her yard time was abruptly canceled. Shifts changed frequently, and no one met her gaze during interactions. The prison felt like a thick, damp, cold fog surrounding every step she took. But instead of retreating, Maya quietly observed. Every change was etched in her memory, mapping a tactical blueprint. Injustice was no longer abstract, it had schedules, gestures, and the silent complicity of witnesses who chose to turn away. A few days later, Maya noticed something more suspicious. When requesting a medical check, she found no records of the strangulation incident in the prison health system. When she inquired, the nurse bowed her head slightly and hurried away. After dinner, a young guard on shift lingered unusually while handing over a meal tray. Avoiding her eyes, he whispered, "I know that was wrong, but here, no one dares to speak." His words were a silent lightning bolt, confirming what Maya faced was not mere administrative error, but a coordinated system. They didn't need to convict her by law because they believed they had the right to detain, strangle, and erase all evidence. A week later, the first news from outside slipped quietly in. The public defender was suddenly withdrawn from the case without reason or official notice. An officer delivering the message said bluntly, "Someone else will take over." Maya neither smiled nor nodded, but knew deeply that the complaint had struck a nerve. A chain reaction had begun. That afternoon, returning to her cell, Maya found a small folded note beneath her meal tray. No name, no sign. She opened it and read the short, slightly smudged blue ink message. "Silence is the only way to leave this place intact." She read slowly, then crumpled the paper in her palm. Tossing it into the corner, she stood tall, shoulders squared. The muscles of a soldier tightened, eyes sharpened like blades freshly honed after weeks of confinement. There was no turning back now. From here, she was no longer standing alone in the dark. A flame had been ignited. Millfield, every stone and guardian of this decaying system, would soon feel the heat spreading. The judicial officer called Maya in late afternoon when the sunlight had faded behind the iron bars. "Legal representation has been assigned by the military," he said without meeting her eyes, his tone flat, as if reading a bureaucratic order. Maya stood slowly but steadily. She didn't ask who had sent the lawyer, knowing well no one appeared here without a purpose. The interrogation room had one-way glass walls and a steel table between them. The woman seated across was reviewing a thin stack of documents. Her suit was impeccably pressed, movements economical, hair tied back, sharp features, eyes like knives, carefully sheathed. She didn't stand or offer a handshake when Maya entered, only nodded slightly and immediately asked, "Why did the hallway cameras lose signal exactly when you were transferred to the cell?" Maya didn't answer right away. She sat opposite, eyes scanning the table for recording devices before resting on the woman's face. Name, Emily Carter, military attorney assigned by the Internal Affairs Office of the Department of Justice. The answer was firm, without waiting for confirmation. For a brief moment they studied each other silently, like two sharpshooters in a dark forest. One wrong move and the other fires first. Maya broke the silence first. "What do you want?" Emily slid a file across the table. "I want to know exactly what you saw, heard, and remember from the moment you were stopped until the attack in the cell." Maya looked her straight in the eyes. "I will answer in my own way. As long as it's truthful, I don't care how." Emily did not raise her eyebrows. Maya began recounting, short, precise, clear, every timeline, every face, each step, the sound of the door locking. No judgments, just facts. Emily wrote rapidly without interruption, pausing only once, briefly, to mark something important. When Maya mentioned the camera's dark lens, Emily stared. I checked footage from Millfield Station. The hallway camera tape in Sector C was deleted that night. Not lost signal, deliberately erased. Maya nodded lightly. I figured as much. Emily didn't smile. I also discovered that in the past 3 years, Millfield PD had at least 3 complaints of excessive force. All were escalated to higher authorities, but none reopened for investigation. The names involved are familiar: Cole, Grant, and a Roderick Trent. Trent was the night shift supervisor when I was transferred, Maya said slowly. Emily closed the file. I'm not here to negotiate your sentence or bargain with the prosecution. I'm here to find out who's dirty. Maya leaned back, eyes closed a few seconds. For the first time since arriving at Millfield Station, she felt someone to talk to, not to beg or defend. She opened her eyes and regarded Emily like an officer sizing up a new commanding officer. I once dismantled a foreign espionage network with 2 testimonies and scant evidence, she said. This, if you dare to proceed, we will finish it. Emily smiled faintly, neither approving nor doubting. I have stepped in. The question is, are you ready to see it through? Maya tilted her head slightly as if nodding, not agreeing, but acknowledging. The battle lines were drawn. She was no longer the hunted. Immediately after their first meeting, Emily filed a request to expand access to her client. Not just legal counsel, but continuous collaboration to prepare a counter-strategy. The jail initially hesitated, citing security and limited time. Emily didn't raise her voice. A stamped document from Internal Affairs removed every obstacle. Their meetings took place in a small room inside the administrative area, where they sat across from each other, unsupervised. Maya began sketching the station layout from memory: camera positions, guards' habits, shift changes, meal times, and lock hours. No detail was overlooked. Emily cross-referenced these with internal logs, corridor maps, and duty rosters from the past 3 months. Together, they built a 3-layered counterattack model. First, reconstructing the scene and timing of Maya's arrest, cross-heckered with the missing footage and shift logs. Next, they listed procedural violations: failure to read rights, warrantless searches, absence of detention records. Finally, they pinpointed likely masterminds, focusing on names lurking behind official reports. After several days, the jail reacted. One morning, Maya found her personal towel missing, toilet paper withheld. Another day, meals arrived nearly an hour late, cold and soaked. A young officer suddenly switched shifts and stared at her for 10 seconds before leaving. None serious enough to file complaints, but clear signs of a hidden hand. Emily noticed early. Quietly, she submitted an internal memo through military channels requesting psychological impact monitoring for personnel under uncertain legal status. The next morning, guards in the block were cautious. They avoided lingering looks, answered Emily politely, and stopped throwing food trays. During a records check, Emily found the signature confirming the shift when Maya was moved belonged to Roderick Trent, the deputy chief never mentioned in prior reports. His name also appeared in a civil complaint last year involving a black man who died in custody. The case was quickly closed, citing insufficient evidence to conclude misconduct. Emily reread that phrase, fingers tapping the table. This is no longer a rogue officer's game, she said, eyes fixed on the files. They are a group, systematic and willing to do anything to keep the surface calm. Maya didn't respond immediately. She stared out the frosted window at part of the yard bathed in afternoon light. Everything here was designed to wear people down. Light, schedules, drip control. But when someone nearby knows how to observe and act at the right time, the system begins to crack. Are you sure? Maya asked evenly. If this uproots the whole town, are you ready to be pulled down with it? Emily closed the file, clipped her pen to the spine. I come from the system. I know how it works. Now I want to see it pay. In that moment between them, no longer lawyer and client, but 2 warriors on the same front, one who survived real battlefields, the other confronting a labyrinth of power and law. No handshakes, no promises, just moving forward. Under the harsh white light of the archives room, Emily Carter sat upright, facing two representatives from the detention center, her military ID deliberately angled to reveal the badge clearly. Her voice was not loud, but each word struck the table like a hammer. I demand full access to all hallway camera footage from the moment Maya Bennett was escorted in until the next morning, along with medical records, intake reports, and any recordings related to her movement within the facility. The two men across the table hesitated. The older one cleared his throat and began to explain in a practiced tone honed to dodge responsibility. There's a software glitch in the recording system of Block D. The data might have been corrupted. Emily did not let him finish. She pulled out a printed document and pushed it toward them. This is a letter I am preparing to send to the Department of Justice. It requests that this detention center confirm the military prisoner's camera data was lost due to technical failure. Are you sure you want to sign it? The room fell silent. 15 minutes later, she received a USB containing a fragmented video lasting less than 3 minutes, extracted exactly from the requested time frame. Although edited and compressed, the footage was clear enough for Maya to recognize herself being led down the hallway. At one moment, the lights suddenly flickered off. She tilted her head and froze the frame. At this moment, Maya whispered, pointing to the screen, I was pushed from behind and collided with the left wall. Emily marked the frame, then opened the recently provided medical file. The injury on the left cheek was described vaguely as bruise caused by passive collision during transport. There were no photos, no time-stamped, no physician's signature, only a barely legible scrawl in the intake confirmation. Maya tilted her head and smirked. They wrote it like I just fell into the wall and nobody saw. No evidence is a kind of evidence, Emily said without taking her eyes off the screen. And light doesn't lie. She used software to isolate the flickering light segment, slowing down the footage. In that clip, Maya was moving when the image stuttered. One frame briefly showed a shadow behind her, an arm bending with the elbow raised high, an action impossible to be accidental. Emily saved this clip in an encrypted file labeled Counterclaim Starting Point. When silence returned, she looked at Maya. I will request full footage of the entire hallway and the undisclosed medical database. Maya nodded. The faint bruise on her left cheek remained, but her eyes no longer carried a defensive look. A silent shift had occurred within her, as if finally the darkness had revealed a crack and a soldier had found an exit path, not to escape, but to strike back. In a small meeting room behind the archives, Emily spread a series of documents across the cold aluminum table. On top was a copy of Officer Ryan Cole's statement, signed and stamped within 2 hours of Maya's arrest. A handwritten note tilted across it read, Subject lost balance and fell into the wall while moving. No force from law enforcement. Maya sat silently, reading every line. She made no objections, only took a pen and marked one word, lost. Then she tapped lightly on the detention center map they were reconstructing. Here, she pointed to the corner with the blurriest camera, the left wall, rough surface. The push came from behind with an elbow. I didn't see his face then. Emily pulled out an image from the old file, retrieved via deep access to the prison's security system. The hallway appeared dim under weak light, but in the lower left corner, a smudged brown streak stretched about 10 centimeters from the wall. Bloodstain, Maya stated firmly. Or at least a smear of incompletely wiped blood, Emily added, carefully zooming in on the image and printing a large copy. If she fell by herself, the blood would be at the impact point, but this streak is offset. It proves the force came from behind, not from slipping. No further words were needed. They both understood it was a flaw. A small piece, but enough to break the hastily constructed forgery system. The very next day, Emily sent an official request to reconstruct the scene with military supervision present. The detention center responded with a neatly written refusal letter, citing lack of technical capacity and personnel. But to Emily, that letter was the first stone she needed, a tacit admission of evasion. As legal counsel, Emily filed a petition with the regional military court to temporarily suspend Millfield Police's authority over the case, citing systematic risk of misconduct, and potential evidence tampering. Simultaneously, she sent an urgent alert to the Federal Investigation Office, attaching a comparison between the statements, hallway photos, medical records, and the edited, flickering camera footage. The letter read, "The more sophisticated the forgery, the more it reveals its rushed parts." That night, Maya was allowed to receive a printed frame under dim light. She placed the photo on a broken wooden table in her cell, staring at the distorted shadows. Part of her remained alert like a soldier tracking enemy signals, the other inching toward something deeper, the feeling that she was no longer alone in this fight. She whispered, as if speaking to herself, "They painted it too perfectly to hide where the fake lies." And there, amid the blurred ink, the smeared blood, the overly neat testimony, Maya realized one thing: the truth does not need to flaunt itself. It only needs to endure. Kayla Brooks, a senior journalism student, sat before her laptop in a small rented room on the outskirts of Millfield. The wind slipped through the narrow window, brushing her neck and reminding her of the chill that ran down her spine when she first confronted Ryan Cole. 3 months earlier, Cole had stopped her car on a night without warning or clear reason. He shouted at her, calling her a troublemaking black girl, threatening that if she didn't keep quiet, he would show her what defying orders means. At that moment, Kayla secretly recorded the encounter on her phone for a final paper, an investigation into abuse of power in law enforcement. But after the incident, she panicked, deleted the paper, stored the video on a hard drive, and pretended it never existed. Kayla knew well that in Millfield, the truth saved no one. It only made the brave disappear faster. Things seemed to settle until she saw Maya Bennett's face on television. News of a black female soldier arrested for resisting arrest spread throughout the area. Kayla didn't need to hear the full report. The way Ryan Cole stood, the way he yanked Maya, and how he dragged her from the car, it was all chillingly familiar. Cole used the same tactics, the same gaze. He was still there, and he was doing it again. Kayla trembled as she looked toward the corner of the desk where her hard drive rested. She knew what she had to do, but the fear was greater than ever. For the first time in weeks, she opened her email, created an anonymous account, and typed a single line, "I have evidence that can change Maya Bennett's case, but I need protection." Less than 2 hours later, Emily Carter responded. They agreed to meet at a small cafe by the highway, a place without surveillance cameras and with staff who asked no questions. Kayla sat across from Emily wearing a gray hoodie, gripping her backpack strap tightly. She didn't smile or give her name. When Emily asked, "Do you have something?" Kayla answered briefly, "A clip, over 2 minutes long." Cole's face, voice, threatening behavior clearly recorded. Emily asked, "Are you planning to present it in court?" Kayla was silent. She glanced around and whispered, "If that video leaks, I'll be dead before I leave the state." Emily made no objection. She nodded, saying, "I'm not here to force you. I'm here because you might be the last person who can stop something spiraling out of control." Kayla sighed, her eyes reflecting conflicted turmoil. Then, from her backpack, she pulled out a USB wrapped in paper and quietly placed it in Emily's palm. Before leaving, she spoke softly enough for only Emily to hear, "If I disappear, tell people why." The military lawyer's office was so quiet that the sound of typing echoed from the next room. Emily Carter sat before her computer screen, eyes fixed on the footage loaded from the USB. Every second revealed Ryan Cole's face, squinting, snarling profanities. The audio was clear, each word deliberate. "Black people like you aren't allowed to hang around here." Then came the chilling action. Cole drew his gun and pointed it at Kayla Brooks as she stood unarmed. Emily leaned forward, increasing the volume. She rewound the moment Cole approached Kayla. Gun raised, he shouted in a tone more commanding than lawful. The streetlights illuminated his face clearly. No fear, no hesitation, only raw, brutal authority. When Maya watched the clip, she said nothing at first. Her eyes glued to the screen, every muscle frozen in intense focus. Her hand rested on her knee, fingers tightening visibly. After the video ended, Maya spoke briefly. "He acts out of habit. This isn't the first time, and if he's not stopped, it won't be the last." Emily turned back to the computer, researching Millfield Police Department's internal files. Within hours, she found 3 complaints against Ryan Cole. All had stalled due to insufficient evidence or complainants withdrawing. But now things had changed. This video was undeniable proof, enough to move the case beyond local authorities to the state inspector's office. Emily knew well that from here on, every move would go beyond simple legality. They were confronting a network skilled at shielding itself, silencing dissent, and ready to strike. Meanwhile, Kayla began to feel the cost of truth. On her way back to the dorm after the meeting, she noticed a silver SUV trailing her slowly. Once, then again at the next corner. Upon arrival, her dorm door showed signs of tampering, though nothing was missing. Kayla's roommate, a nursing student, showed her an anonymous message received moments before. Don't let it go too far. Emily acted without hesitation. She called an old colleague now serving in military police, requesting urgent support. A temporary safe house was arranged that very day. No signs, no Kayla's name registered, no phone allowed. All according to first-level witness protection protocol. When Kayla was brought to the shelter, she was still shaken, but in her eyes, fear was starting to fade. Emily sat beside her, voice calm. We don't need many weapons, just one piece of truth, presented at the right time. On the office computer screen, the clip paused on a familiar frame. Ryan Cole squinting, gun raised, lips parting in a fierce snarl. The power that had silenced so many was now frozen, in a moment preserved forever on a hard drive. And this time, it would be brought into the light, in the right place, at the right time. The Millfield courtroom echoed with the scraping of chairs, as townspeople squeezed into the back rows, silent but heavy-eyed, as if they had come not to hear the truth but to witness a verdict already decided. Local police officers were evenly spaced throughout the room, their uniforms crisply pressed and eyes glaring toward one side. Maya Bennett was led in from a side door, her hands still cuffed. She walked steadily, back straight, her gaze calm yet cold. Her hair was neatly tied at the nape, prison clothes, tidy, but unable to hide the soldier's aura in every step. Whispers rose behind her, some sneering, others turning away. Ryan Cole had arrived early, seated in the front row of the prosecution side, arms crossed, eyes half mocking, half disdainful. His police uniform hugged his muscular frame, the shiny badge like a self-awarded medal. When Maya's eyes briefly met his, Cole tilted his head slightly, lips moving. You may wear camo, but here, I am the law. Emily Carter entered through the main door, her charcoal gray suit making her stand out among the sea of ash-colored attire. She walked straight to the defense table without looking back. Before the judge could take his seat, Emily stood and spoke clearly. I wish to record a statement regarding provocation from the prosecution, threatening the defendant within the courtroom environment. The judge, a silver-haired man wearing thin glasses, interrupted her with a cool demeanor. The proceedings have not started, Miss Carter. Please follow protocol. Emily made no reply, only tilting her head slightly. Maya sat silently, eyes quietly observing everyone in the courtroom. Some stared directly, others deliberately avoided eye contact, and a few judged her as if she were a strange exhibit on display. The prosecutor began reading the charges. His voice was steady, but the words sharp. Assaulting an officer, resisting law enforcement, possession of controlled substances with intent. Each phrase weighed heavily and carried insinuations. Emily sat with arms crossed, lightly twirling a pen on the table, her face unmoved except for a slight frown at the phrase, intent to flee. Maya heard every word as if it were a signal pushing her to the limit, yet she did not react. The accusations washed over her training like waves over rocks. She memorized but concealed her feelings. Cole leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the table with a steady rhythm, as if counting down to an inevitable victory. Each glance he cast at Maya carried mockery and challenge, as if she were just another victim in the long list he had broken with this system. He did not know that right after this procedure, what he underestimated most, a small badge, would throw the entire performance out of sync. Emily stood, her voice ringing clearly in the suffocating courtroom air. "Your Honor, I request that the defendant's handcuffs be removed to present special identity verification documents under Federal Statute 18-232, applicable to military personnel under confidentiality." The judge raised his eyebrows, about to respond, when Cole snapped up from his seat. "Absurd! This is a local criminal case, no grounds to invoke military immunity." Emily did not change her tone. She withdrew a sealed envelope marked with the Department of Defense's red stamp and handed it directly to the court clerk. "This is an authorization letter from the Military Security Office. I believe once opened, Your Honor will have no doubt." The courtroom fell silent, as if someone had muted all sound. Maya remained seated, eyes serene and forward. The judge skimmed a few lines and sighed softly. "Request granted. Defendant, you may stand." Maya took a slow breath before rising, amidst eyes fixed on her every movement. She extended her hands forward for the courtroom officer to remove the cuffs. The metallic click sounded harsh, like a blade cutting through the prejudice that had wrapped around her all this time. From inside her shirt, she pulled a small black wallet, flipped open its protective cover. On the black velvet background, a gleaming badge. The Navy SEAL insignia with eagle, anchor, and trident dazzled under the lights. No one moved. A woman in the back row dropped her pen with a sound like thunder. Cole froze, eyes wide. His forehead twitched. His throat went dry, as if swallowing iron. Emily stepped forward, placing a thick file before the judge. Details of operations, service confirmation, training records, and top-secret security assignments. "We are ready to provide more upon approval." The judge flipped through pages and nodded lightly. No one dared speak. Even those who had mocked Maya earlier now turned away, avoiding her gaze. From initial scorn, they sat as if their own conscience had been exposed in the open. Cole tried to smile, but his lips twitched involuntarily. He glanced at Maya with eyes begging for a reason to cling to. But Maya did not look at him. She returned to her seat, sitting as composed as before, neat, calm, without satisfaction, as if the badge had never appeared. Emily whispered beside her, loud enough for Maya to hear. "Now they see who you really are." Maya replied succinctly, "No. Now they are beginning to fear." The judge set down the file firmly. "The trial is adjourned. The court will verify the military documents presented." Then he stood and bowed slightly. "I acknowledge today's proceedings have taken a completely different direction." People began to stand, but no one looked back at Maya. It was as if the light from that badge had illuminated every prejudice, every accusation, and bent every argument they once believed true. The press conference took place on Monday morning in the first-floor hall of the Millfield Police Department. Chief Anthony Grant appeared before dozens of reporters, standing behind a black-draped wooden podium, holding a brief statement. In a calm and solemn tone, he declared, "We are committed to conducting a thorough and impartial investigation into all details related to the arrest of Lieutenant Maya Bennett. No one is above the law, and every citizen has the right to lawful protection." The media quickly circulated the statement as a positive sign amid the storm of controversy. Some journalists even called Grant the first to break the silence from the law enforcement side. On the surface, he seemed to be offering Maya a lifeline, but to Emily Carter, those flattering words came at a suspiciously convenient moment. Grant speaks up right when public opinion starts leaning her way. That's no coincidence. It's damage control, Emily said in a small meeting room at the detention center. Maya looked at her and nodded slightly. He knows exactly when to show up to look like the hero. With instincts sharpened through countless operations, Maya kept a measure of doubt. Still, she understood that if Grant genuinely leaned toward justice, he could be a strategic lever. But if not, Grant himself would be the one locking every door she was trying to open. The meeting between Maya and Grant took place that afternoon. He arrived at the jail with 2 aides and was escorted into the interrogation engine room. Unlike the tough image often seen on TV, Grant appeared softer, wearing a light gray shirt, unarmed, with a friendly expression. "I wanted to meet you in person," he began, pulling out a chair opposite Maya. "Not everyone keeps calm in situations like this. You handled it better than most I've met." Maya didn't answer immediately. She listened to his tone, watched every movement. Grant lowered his voice and continued, "I will do my best to make sure you aren't buried under bureaucracy and red tape. This case needs to be clarified." Maya was blunt. "Then, can you tell me why the hallway camera lost signal exactly when I was attacked?" Grant smiled faintly, but his eyes didn't. "Technical issue. Possibly a malfunction in the storage system. We're investigating. The process takes time." The answer silenced Maya. She didn't expect too much from the meeting, but his smooth evasion felt rehearsed. When the conversation ended, Grant stood, placed a hand on Maya's shoulder in a familiar gesture, and leaned close to whisper, "Those who know better won't get into trouble here." Maya froze. That phrase echoed words Ryan Cole once uttered. Not advice, but a power signal. A phrase repeated in the right way, at the right place, with the same tone, too exact to be coincidence. As Grant left, Maya sat still, eyes fixed on the ceiling, lips pressed tight. In her mind, a new map began to form. A branch of power perhaps not on the battlefield she had expected. That night, Emily secretly handed Maya a dossier, printed from the police department's internal server. It had no official title, only summaries of classified meetings. Maya flipped through until she stopped at a short line. Day 14. Priority order for fast-track processing of unknown military target. Direct supervision, A. Grant. She set the documents down and sighed once, not from surprise, but confirmation. The true shadow was slowly peeling off its honorable shell, and this time it wore a police hat. The internal file Emily gave Maya the night before wasn't thick, but each page cut deeply into the system. The two women sat across from each other in the jail's visiting room, Emily's hands turning pages as Maya stared at the upper left corner where an electronic clearance code should have been. On one page, the note, "Priority personnel check for returning military," was underlined in red pen, the signature beneath, unclear. Just two swirling initials, chillingly familiar. Emily pulled out a comparison sheet. This signature appeared in Grant's archived files 2 years ago, when he oversaw the Special Personnel Division. "The handwriting matches 80%. Maya said nothing, but in her eyes, the pieces were fitting together, even if the image wasn't the truth the town once believed. Not stopping at the signature, Emily reached out to an old source, an IT engineer formerly working at Millfield Police, fired for a security protocol breach. They met in a deserted mall parking lot, under the pretense of a military lawyer needing to cross-check old records. The man approached, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "I was ordered to delete the system logs that night, specifically to wipe the footage of the hallway cameras in the detention area." When Emily asked who gave the order, he avoided a direct answer. "The 3rd floor, the only office there. You know who's." Back in her cell, Maya lay still on the bed, recalling Grant's words. "Those who know better won't get into trouble." A veteran who once heard that from Grant himself had told her years ago. Someone pushed out of town, stripped of honor over vague charges. No one knew where he went, his records nearly erased from civilian systems. Maya understood this wasn't an idle phrase, but an identifying marker, a familiar, deliberate, and systematic warning tool. Emily didn't stop there. She delved into Ryan Cole's personnel file and uncovered a significant connection. Cole had once been a temporary scout in a special training unit under Grant's command when Grant was a reserve officer. Their relationship goes beyond administrative order. Cole is someone Grant trained and covered for, Emily said, voice low but steely. Maya looked out the wire mesh window, voice dropping. "Grant isn't the one lighting the fuse. He's the fire handler, sitting outside counting every flare, then choosing when to step in like a firefighter. She stood, walked to the table, and met Emily's eyes. He's not against us. He's pushing us exactly where he needs to burn himself. In the trap he sat. Emily nodded without blinking. Then it's time to expose him in the light. Two women, one a former elite soldier, the other a military legal representative, waited for no rescue. They knew survival meant peeling back every mask, every layer of protection. And Grant, with all his false glory and ideals, was the mastermind who needed to be brought down. Not by bullets, but by evidence and true justice. The game was only just beginning to turn. Maya sat still on the metal chair, the cold light from the fluorescent lamp tracing every wrinkle on her forehead. The door opened and Marcus Lewis entered with a tense expression. Dressed in plain clothes and a pale blue shirt, he carried a thin file. His voice retained its usual politeness, yet Maya began noticing an unusual tone in every word. He said, "Ms. Bennett, I want to speak privately, not as an internal affairs officer, but as someone concerned about your safety." Marcus sat down across from her, eyes showing concern. "I know you are cooperating with lawyer Emily, but my advice is to remain cooperative and low profile. Everyone here has their limits." Maya did not answer, fixing her gaze on him. She watched his facial expressions, the way his fingers lightly tapped the file, how his voice lowered whenever he emphasized the word cooperate. She asked quietly, "Who do you think is crossing the line?" Her tone was calm, neither cold nor friendly. Marcus hesitated, then smiled lightly. "I just want things to go peacefully. Tension isn't always the answer. That blackout that night, sometimes it's just a coincidence." Maya narrowed her eyes. She had never mentioned a blackout. She only told Emily about the disabled cameras, never a word about power loss. Marcus had just revealed information outsiders couldn't know unless they had seen an unpublished report. She didn't question him, didn't react, but in her mind, the door of caution swung wide open. After that meeting, Maya started paying attention. Marcus always appeared just as sensitive documents were mentioned. He lingered near investigation rooms and attended meetings unrelated to his direct duties. She observed his habits, moving slowly, eyes scanning devices quickly, but never asking specific questions. A man who once showed goodwill now acted like he was controlling information rather than sharing it. One evening, from her holding cell, Maya cracked the door and observed the hallway. Marcus had just stepped out of the security server room. He held no files, but his phone screen glowed. Wearing headphones, Maya clearly heard a few words he spoke despite the distance. "The one in the mirror is awake. No one knows about the backup yet." His tone was completely different, cold, steady, and very controlled. Not like reporting to a superior, but more like a clandestine transaction. Maya stepped back, sat on the bed, hands clasped. She reviewed the facts. The blackout timing, Marcus avoiding legal questions, his advice to keep silent, and now the cryptic words behind the supposedly safe door. Each piece began to connect, but not along the official line. An old phrase echoed in her mind from Bud/S training. "Not everyone in the foxhole is on your side. Some dig tunnels beneath their own comrades." She clenched her fists, steadying her breath. If Marcus was a pawn on the other side, he was playing his role well. But like all performances, eventually the script slips from the writer's hand. She sat upright, eyes fixed on the crack in the door as if seeing through the wall. The words rang clearly inside her. "Your right hand, either your sharpest strike or the blade in your back." In the lawyer's office, the computer screen light illuminated Emily Carter's face. She scrolled through the internal surveillance system's access logs from the night the signal was lost. Maya sat behind, arms folded, eyes fixed on the login codes appearing gradually, ML 2021. The code corresponded exactly to the time the hallway cameras were disabled. Maya said nothing, only tilted her head slightly. Her eyes sparkled, as if confirming a long-held suspicion. "What else do we need to prove this?" Emily asked quietly but clearly. Maya replied softly. Not to prove. We exploit. The next day, Maya asked Emily to help create a psychological test. During a discussion with investigators, Emily suddenly asked loudly, "Does the file found in the third-floor storage relate to the internal camera system?" A seemingly casual question, but it made the atmosphere pause for a beat. Marcus, standing near the door, froze for half a second. His eyes darted quickly to Maya, then he turned away hurriedly. For the next 10 minutes, he excused himself to make a call and did not return until the meeting's end. When the door closed, Maya turned to Emily. That's instinct. No one leaves before hearing the conclusion, unless they know that information shouldn't be spoken. Emily nodded. Accustomed to mind games, she had to reassess the woman before her. Maya was not just a soldier. She understood the rule. To survive, sometimes you must wield the enemy's own knife to carve a bloody path. The two planned a report to leak in a limited-access open directory stating that the FBI had intervened and traced the IP of an account with unusual access. The conclusion read, "The insider is under surveillance. Arrest action will follow if intrusion continues." Within 24 hours, the system reported unauthorized access to a backup server using the code ML2021, but via an anonymous workstation. This proved one thing: Marcus had taken the bait. More importantly, he was afraid and trying to erase his tracks. Maya was not elated. She added a line to her personal journal. When a traitor begins to hide, he's ready to sell something else to save his skin. That afternoon in the interrogation room, Maya sat alone before the fully restored security camera. She looked directly into the lens as if speaking to whoever was on the other side of the screen. "We know who you are," she said slowly, "but I don't need to know what you did. I need to know why. Betrayal is an act, not a nature. Maybe you did it for money, out of fear, or simply because you believed you were right." She paused, then leaned close to the table, her eyes icy. "I need your reason before we decide to use you or eliminate you." The camera kept rolling, but whoever watched from behind the screen, whether Marcus or another handler, surely felt one thing. The game had turned, and the prey was beginning to hunt the hunter. Emily stepped out of the apartment before the morning light had warmed the pavement. The early air in Millfield seemed peaceful, yet inside her a vague unease quietly crept in. Approaching her car, she stopped. A plain white piece of paper was tucked carefully under the windshield wiper. No writing, no images, just a thin, suspiciously clean sheet. What made her hesitate was not its appearance, but the faint scent of perfume lingering on it, a familiar fragrance from the past, tied to someone she wished to forget. She looked around. No one was there. The alley was silent, as usual. She crumpled the paper and slipped it into her jacket pocket without telling Maya. Her intuition warned her this was no simple message, but she needed time to verify, and more importantly, she did not want Maya distracted while the legal battle entered dangerous territory. All morning, Emily's discomfort remained. In the rearview mirror, a black SUV appeared repeatedly behind her, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but never completely gone. She tried changing routes several times, but the vehicle always returned to the same position behind her. At the office, when she opened her laptop to review Maya's case files, some documents were missing. The most important files remained, but notes concerning Chief Grant and the witness list had disappeared. Wetness filtered through the window. Wetness pushed the... This was no syncing error or system glitch. It was deliberate tampering. Whoever did this knew what they were looking for. That afternoon, Emily received a brief text from an old colleague. "Be careful, Emily. They're going further than usual." No explanation, no name, yet she understood that these words meant this was no ordinary trial. This was a battle where shadowy figures would use any means to silence those who dug too deep. When Emily arrived at work, Maya was already waiting in the room. Emily was 15 minutes late, a rare occurrence. Maya looked at her, eyes probing. Emily avoided the gaze, set down her bag, quietly opened her laptop and said, almost trying to downplay it, "Seems this trial is touching on something many want to hide at all costs." No one spoke further. The only sounds were the wind against the walls and the wary silence. Maya nodded slightly, but in her eyes, what Emily said was no longer speculation, it was certainty. Dusk fell as Emily drove away from the courthouse. She chose a less trafficked side street to return home. The feeling of being watched weighed heavily on her neck. Turning a sharp corner, she sensed something wrong. A slight wobble of the steering wheel, a faint screech from the tires. She immediately pulled over to check. The left rear wheel was oddly shifted. Not fully loose, but it seemed someone had subtly loosened the lug nuts, waiting for a centrifugal force in a turn to cause a sudden tire blowout. Her hand trembled as she pulled out her phone. No calls needed, no confirmation required. Her former colleague's words echoed clearer than ever. They're going further than usual. And now Emily knew further meant direct harm. This was no warning. It was a preemptive strike. If she wasn't careful, next time it wouldn't be a lug nut, but the brakes, the gas, or a real threat to life. She stood upright, scanning the empty street. No one was there, but she knew someone was close. Emily crouched by the wheel, palms dirty with road dust, heart still skipping after the near accident. The headlights behind flashed suddenly. The dark SUV came to a smooth stop at the roadside. The door opened and Maya stepped out. Without asking or showing surprise, she quietly approached the damaged car, knelt beside Emily, and examined the lug nuts carefully. A cold silence settled. The lug nuts were loosened with a specialized tool, Maya said evenly, as if reading a report. Fresh scratches, even turns. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Emily looked at her, wanting to say something but choking on her words. Maya pulled a small round device from her jacket pocket and placed it under the car. When a faint beep sounded, she reached under and retrieved a small black metal object about the size of a fingertip. She held it up and Emily's eyes narrowed instinctively. A micro GPS, only active within a 5-mile radius, Maya explained. Placed no more than a day or two ago. They're tracking your movements. Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry. Maya's calm voice did not comfort her, but made everything feel heavier, more real. They got into the car and closed the doors. The interior light cast a pale yellow glow on their faces. Emily placed her hands on the steering wheel, staring out the window in a low voice. "I'm used to pressure in the courtroom, but this is something else. What exactly am I fighting against, Maya?" Maya stared straight ahead, voice low but sharp as a blade. "A system. It has money to buy laws, power to silence people, and enough reasons to fear what we're uncovering." Emily nodded quietly, her gaze thoughtful. She understood protecting Maya was no longer just a personal duty, but part of a war she had been pulled into, since agreeing to take the case. Maya took from her bag a small item wrapped in black cloth. When unwrapped, it was an emergency alert device used for civilian operations. She placed it in Emily's hand. Press the center button. If attacked or followed, the signal transmits directly to the military communications team, encrypted within 3 seconds. Emily took it, her eyes showing a mix of gratitude and determination. Maya also showed her how to escape plastic zip ties, recognize being followed by mirror reflexes, and how to distract pursuers when moving alone. She did this neither hurriedly nor anxiously, but with deliberate steps as if training a soldier heading into battle. Late at night, they stopped several houses from the courthouse, turned off the lights, and sat silently in the dark cabin. Police patrol cars passed regularly, their red and blue flashing lights reflected on the windshield like a constant warning. Emily exhaled deeply, eyes following a car as it turned a corner. "Now, I understand why you don't shake in the courtroom." Maya didn't turn, but kept her gaze fixed forward, as if watching something beyond ordinary sight. "Because if you tremble, you die first," she whispered. Another pause, but this time it was not heavy. It was unspoken solidarity. As another car sped by, Maya slightly tilted her head back, her eyes hardening. "We have been followed," she said slowly, like a command. Then her lips pressed tight, voice dropping, each word piercing the silent space. "But now it's time to turn the tables. A thin crescent moon hung like a blade suspended against a silvery gray sky as Maya left Millfield, heading toward the wilderness in the west where phone signals flickered and satellite maps blurred. She drove by memory, navigating red dirt curves that led to a narrow road overgrown with weeds. This was the last place on the map where clarity still lingered: Elias Harper's farm. The wooden house was hidden among tall pines with no streetlights or fences in sight. Everything there seemed forgotten by the modern world. Maya stopped the car without turning off the engine, gripping the steering wheel longer than usual. Finally, she opened the door and stepped out, gravel crunching softly underfoot. No one came to greet her. The wooden door creaked open as she touched the porch step. "Come in. I knew you would come." The voice was low and hoarse, devoid of emotion. Elias Harper sat at an old wooden table inside, a kerosene lamp casting shadows across his weathered face. His eyes were sharp as ever, only the silver in his hair and his slightly stooped back betrayed the passage of time, as if time could alter form but was powerless against spirit. Maya entered without a word, placing a printed dossier from classified data on the table. Elias flipped through the pages quickly yet carefully. His gaze stopped on a photo from Maya's arrest scene, her hands cuffed, head bowed, blood staining her collar. Then his gaze shut. "You walked into a place without law, but pretended there was law," Elias said without looking away from the photo. "And you wonder why every military and civilian principle fails." Maya stood silent, offering no rebuttal. Elias turned pages more slowly, lips pressing into a firm line. He knew this was coming. The issue was that Maya had chosen not to avoid it. What you face is a system skilled in disguise. It wears the face of justice, speaks the language of law, but its roots are manipulation. You strike with transparency, it hides behind procedure. You resist with truth, it distorts through paperwork. Elias set the dossier down and looked Maya straight in the eye. They don't need to kill you with a gun. They make you doubt yourself, make your allies question you, make you question the very morals you fight for. He poured water into 2 dull ceramic cups, sliding one toward Maya. She didn't drink. Elias didn't offer. Each held their ground like 2 warriors on opposite fronts of an old battlefield. No need for explanation or persuasion. "There was a mission in Kandahar," Elias said, his voice deepening. "I led a team breaching a rebel compound. Everything went smoothly until comms were jammed. The traitor wasn't outside the perimeter, but inside the team. The worst part, I didn't recognize him because he acted perfectly, following protocol, orders, and every step like a manual. That's what I want you to understand. The system you fight acts the same, so perfect it makes the good question if they're wrong." Maya said nothing, eyes fixed on the flickering yellow light casting shadows on the wooden wall. The room felt leaden. Something stirred within her. Something untouched by trials, ambushes, or near-death moments. The weariness of reason confronting what seemed right. Elias leaned forward, placing his hand on the table. "Are you here for advice or permission to survive?" The air thickened. A breeze slipped through the door crack, stirring a thin white curtain, the only motion between 2 still figures. Maya met his gaze for a long moment without looking away. For the first time, a small fissure appeared in her eyes. Not weakness, but the quiet of someone realizing she had entered a point of no return. The yellow light illuminated the chipped wooden table between 2 plain white plates holding stale bread and reheated vegetable soup. The dinner was unremarkable for Maya, but the silence between her and Elias carried unusual weight. 2 warriors, 2 generations sitting face to face in a kitchen seemingly severed from time. The wind outside howled through the walls as if the house itself leaned toward darkness. Maya tore a piece of bread without eating it, eyes locked on the dancing flame within the kerosene lamp. Her voice was low but clear. If the enemy wears the same uniform and badge, where does a soldier's limit of endurance lie? Elias didn't answer immediately. He chewed slowly, set down his spoon, as if waiting for memories to surface from deep inside. After a few breaths, he began. "Mogadishu. My team was assigned an internal intel support mission. All initial data matched, maps marked correctly, target names verified thrice. But approaching the evacuation point, Sniper fire came from the safe zone. A team member was shot in the neck, the one I trusted most. Maya tilted her head slightly. Elias continued. The source of the evacuation location was our own logistics officer. He worked both sides. What haunts me isn't the betrayal itself, but that I never saw signs of his deceit. He raised his glass, took a sip. Do you think this is a case? It's a conflict between an individual still holding conscience and a system long lost to it. The more you prove your innocence, the more it looks like a feeble defense. Because the system doesn't care about right or wrong. It needs control. Maya put down the bread piece. Her eyes no longer burned with anger as when she left Millfield. What remained was cold clarity. If this path costs everything, reputation, comrades, even life, would you choose it? Elias did not answer right away. He leaned back, half his wrinkled face lit by lamplight. A long silence followed. Finally, he spoke. If I didn't choose it, you wouldn't be sitting here. A simple phrase, but Maya grasped its weight. They were no longer teacher and student. They stood at opposite ends of the same spear, and this moment reaffirmed the unspoken oath between them. Elias rose, opened a small drawer by the kitchen, and took out a tarnished square metal box. He placed it before Maya. Encrypted hard drive from that infiltration mission. It's offline, untraceable, and only accessible by biometric code. If one day you trust no one, not even yourself, this will be your last resort. Maya took the box. It was heavier than it appeared, not by material, but by meaning. She understood. Elias wasn't just handing over a tool, he was restoring the faith he had fought to keep. As she stepped onto the porch, the night wind slapped her face, causing her to squint. Elias escorted her to the door, standing straight, with hands clasped behind his back. He said no farewell, no handshake, no hug. Like he used to see soldiers off on missions. Silent, but not cold. "Don't come back here," Elias said, eyes distant toward the dark pine grove. "If you fail, don't let me know." Maya said nothing. She got into the car, stored the box in the back compartment, and glanced back through the rearview mirror. Elias stood there, a solitary figure amid the silent fields, like the last marker before all principles faded. As she drove away, for the first time in this fight, she felt not alone. Behind her stood not the army, nor the courts, but a human being, and that was enough to move forward. Maya sat silently at the wooden table, gripping the phone that had rung for the fourth time with no answer. Outside, the sky was turning rainy, distant thunder rolling like vague warnings. She sent an encrypted message using military protocol, but seconds later the screen displayed a response error, accompanied by strange interference. The code streams broke apart, as if someone had interrupted the connection midway. This was no accident. Elias was neither careless nor negligent about maintaining secure communication. The backup channels they had set up were also silent. Both civilian satellite networks and internal devices were as empty as a windless lake. Maya turned off the phone and stood, her expression hardening. She hurried down the hall where Emily was reviewing files for the next day's trial. Without explanation, Emily closed her laptop. "They've already breached us?" Maya nodded. Without knowing what had happened, both understood that time was no longer their asset. Under the scattered rain, they quietly left Millfield by an unpredictable route, heading toward the farm deep in the woods Elias had once called their final refuge. When the car stopped before the old wooden gate, everything was different. The front door was ajar, its hinges clearly off their track. Inside, the house was pitch black. No oil lamps, no footsteps, no signs of life. Maya drew her pistol and stepped carefully across the threshold, each step cautious, as if entering a war zone. The living room was in disarray. Scattered belongings lay around, faint bloodstains trailing toward the stairs. Under the desk, the drawer that had held a secret hard drive was empty. Elias left no signs of a struggle, but every detail suggested he had not been taken without resistance. She clenched her fists, eyes cold as steel. Elias's silence was no longer strategic. It had been forced. Emily circled to the backyard, checking tire tracks. A slight skid mark cut through the dirt road, likely from a large vehicle, possibly a transport truck. Returning to the car, Maya switched on her device. A new message appeared from an anonymous sender, attached with an untitled video. She opened it. On the screen, Elias was bound to a wooden chair, hands behind his back, blood smearing his left shoulder, dim light casting diagonal shadows across half his face. Yet he sat upright, eyes calm, as if awaiting his turn in battle. The man's voice spoke behind the camera, low and rough with a hint of sarcasm. "I don't hate you, Maya. I just want to stop you. Consider what really matters before everyone around you starts paying the price." The video cut abruptly to black. Emily turned away, angrily kicking the car door. "They're targeting those closest to you. They don't need to deal with you directly. They want to destabilize you." Maya said nothing. She pulled up an old tactical map used in their coordinated operation. Markers appeared, but every location was a mystery. She analyzed every possibility, risk, and escape route to rescue Elias, but also saw consequences. Acting immediately would mean losing control of the case, breaking the chain of evidence forming, and surrendering the initiative they had fought so hard to gain. She stood still for a long moment. Emily approached to speak, but Maya raised a hand to stop her. "Is he ready to sacrifice himself so I can continue?" The question was blunt, cold, and raw. Emily didn't answer, and Maya didn't need to hear it. Her eyes were different then, not trembling, not desperate. They belonged to someone who understood that there was only one way to win this war, charging directly into danger without hesitation. That morning, Maya arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual. She crossed the grand hall without glancing around, her stride calm enough that no one noticed anything had changed inside her. Her dark suit was neatly pressed, hair tied back, everything just like the day before, except her gaze was deeper and restrained, as if part of her had fallen into permanent silence. Emily followed, clutching a thicker file than ever before. She neither asked nor spoke, but her steps stretched tight like a rope between reason and emotion. She had seen Maya fight, suffer, even break, but this was something else entirely. Not defeat, but the absolute solitude of someone determined to hold their ground, knowing something irretrievable had been lost. The trial proceeded as usual. Maya sat on the right bench, expression unreadable. She nodded lightly when her name was called, listened to Emily's presentation without interruption. Every action, every reaction was calculated to maintain the status quo. While the court continued reviewing the appeal, Maya quietly issued a series of covert orders. She activated the independent monitoring group Elias had established. Surveillance on suspected illegal detention camps was maintained all night via mid-range satellites and civilian drone GPS data. Just as the atmosphere seemed to wane, a stream of data silently leaked to the local press. A compressed 12-minute video showed Elias being escorted into a secluded facility. Though grainy, the footage identified the lead captor, Ryan Cole. Elias offered no resistance or cries. He stared directly into the camera as if knowing this footage would be his last appearance. His almighty knowledge, Immediately following the clip was a GPS data file accompanied by a preliminary analysis of the vehicle's route and entry-exit logs from the northern Millfield Forest area, extracted from hacked internal access cards from 3 months prior. All data was decrypted and set to auto-relief if Elias did not log back within 36 hours. And now, time was up. When Maya received confirmation of successful transmission, an encrypted message lit up on her private device. The brief text appeared, plain and unadorned. "If you are reading this, I have fulfilled my role. Do not let my death blur why we began." No audio accompanied it, no farewell. It was a final order, quiet, decisive, like everything Elias had ever done. Maya read it repeatedly, then closed her device without saving or replying. She extracted all the data, printed 3 legal dossiers, numbered, signed, and stamped them for public filing in the case. Journalists outside the courtroom needed no prompting. A glance at the headlines was enough. Evidence from a deep insider confirming the existence of uncontrolled detention centers and a police internal order for action. The court could no longer delay. The motion to prosecute Ryan Cole was reconsidered immediately during the same session. Pressure from public opinion, the media and irrefutable evidence forced the judges to reopen the entire investigation process. When the trial concluded, Maya stepped outside onto the courthouse steps. A cold wind tousled her hair beneath a bright sky. A reporter raised a camera, but she did not stop, her gaze fixed firmly on the courthouse gate, her expression unchanged. For the first time since returning to Millfield, there was no doubt in that look, only commitment, cold, unyielding. Elias had fulfilled his role. Now it was hers. The third-floor apartment lay hidden behind a row of old brick houses, its curtains always drawn, the locks changed 3 times within 6 months. Kayla had lived there nearly a year, quietly withdrawing from curious glances and the shattered dreams she once held before recording that video. Every knock at the door made her hold her breath for a few seconds. Sudden headlights from cars outside robbed her of sleep. On her old computer sat the video file backed up in multiple folders encrypted with software Maya had left during their only meeting. Kayla had yet to reopen it, but never deleted it. News about the trial spread, yet she avoided watching television and scrolled past every post mentioning Maya Bennett or Ryan Cole. She dared not read the comments, nor imagine that video going public, linked to her name, her face, and all the fears she wished to forget. At midnight, Kayla sent a brief message. "I'm ready." 10 minutes later came a reply with an encrypted phone number and a meeting place, an old cafe beside the Central Library, a spot few remembered. When Emily arrived, she wore no suit, brought no assistant or security. In her hand was a simple printed form, a witness protection pledge signed by a federal official. They sat across from each other like strangers sharing a dangerous secret. Emily didn't ask why Kayla changed. She only looked into her eyes and saw someone who had once been desperate but now learned to stand without help. Their conversation lasted 11 minutes. No promises, no applause. But when Kayla left, she no longer bowed her head. When Maya heard Kayla agreed to testify, she was reviewing files. Emily entered, placing a copy of the confirmation letter on the table. Maya looked up, her gaze sharp but quiet. After a brief silence, she whispered, almost exhaling, "We are no longer alone." It was not an exclamation, but a confirmation. For Maya, true change came not from arguments, but from a person brave enough to overcome their own fears. The court received notice and immediately arranged special protection. A separate entrance was set up. All recording devices were thoroughly inspected. The media were barred from the witness area, permitted only to report the trial in writing. Emily's and Maya's legal teams worked overnight, verifying the video's validity to prevent the defense from dismissing it on technical grounds. That morning, the courtroom was packed. Media, citizens, and civil rights representatives all attended. Ryan Cole sat in the defendant's row, a crisp white shirt, eyes half mocking, half probing. He had won many cases by breaking witnesses mid-trial. He knew how to stare into fear, and he was used to people collapsing under the spotlight. The courtroom doors opened. Kayla entered. She wore a light gray shirt, black pants, holding a thin file. Her head slightly bowed, steps slow but determined. At the witness stand, she paused briefly, then raised her head. Her gaze was direct, no evasion, no sidestepping. Those eyes that once fled darkness now shone a light into it. The room fell silent. Cole leaned back, his breath faltering. Before him was no longer an easy target, but living proof, someone who knew what happened and had decided to tell everything. Emily stood, her voice steady and clear, needing no emotional appeal. She asked permission to present visual evidence provided directly by the witness. The judge nodded, signaling technicians to start the large projector in the center. The room seemed to hold its breath. The screen lit up. The footage was shaky, audio distorted, but clearly showed a narrow alley behind the residential area. Cole appeared first, wearing plain clothes, accompanied by 2 officers. His voice was low, clear, with a hint of mockery. "She just left the convenience store carrying nothing. I want to find something when she returns to the car." Another officer asked, "Where's the package?" Cole slapped his chest pocket. "Enough for a criminal charge. If they resist, we have the right to do whatever. No one interrupted as the video ended. No edits, no commentary needed. The truth spoke for itself. At the back, a middle-aged woman stood, eyes blazing with anger. To the left, a man shook his head, whispering almost chokingly. The room's atmosphere thickened, as if everyone realized simultaneously what they had long avoided. Cole sat gripping the armrests, eyes unfocused. The defense lawyer tried to challenge the tape's admissibility, but the weak argument only made the objection more isolated. The judge tapped thrice for order. Yet the tide had turned. The courtroom was no longer neutral, but facing exposed lies. Kayla was invited to speak. Sitting upright, her voice audible and steady, she recounted that day when she happened upon Cole and officers gathered behind the store, sensing she should record. She explained receiving 3 anonymous letters, 2 threatening calls, even considering leaving town but choosing to stay. I kept that video out of fear. I lived in silence, but I realized if I didn't speak up, it would happen again, not just to me, but to the next person, and the next after that. She paused, scanning the room before locking eyes with Cole. I stayed silent too long and saw everyone else do the same, but I won't let it continue. No applause followed. The silence was not emptiness, but a dense weight of belief, respect, and awakening spreading. Maya observed from her seat beside Emily. She didn't blink while the video played, nor react during Kayla's testimony, but as Kayla left the stand and passed by her, Maya nodded slowly, firmly, a silent signal among those who understood what it meant to fight quietly. No praise or recognition needed. It was acknowledgement that this young woman had changed everything. After the trial, Emily's law office received a flood of anonymous messages, not threats, but shared stories. Those once intimidated by Cole or his associates, silenced by fear of reprisal, began sending information, copies of files, phone recordings. One even left a handwritten letter slipped under a door, claiming to have witnessed a similar setup but was forced to sign a confidentiality agreement. The door, once sealed by fear, was now ajar. It all began with a video and a girl who chose to step out of safety, stand in the light, and speak the truth. The courtroom was packed, the cold lights casting a harsh glow on every tense face. Emily Carter was preparing to question the next witness when the prosecutor suddenly stood up, his voice cutting across the proceedings with unshakable confidence. Before we continue, the prosecution would like to submit an additional piece of evidence, a recording that shows illegal interference from an individual close to the defendant. The whir of the projector filled the air, and then Marcus Lewis's voice echoed through the courtroom. Tonight, she'll be at Mrs. Fay's house. No bodyguards with her. If we need to act, this is the perfect opportunity. The room fell silent, except for the quickened breathing of the audience. Maya's eyes froze, as if every muscle in her face had drained of blood. Emily turned to Marcus, her lips whispering a question, almost choking on it. Is this real? Marcus remained silent, standing still at the back row, his gaze fixed on the floor. No denial, no reaction, just the silence that made the whole room feel as though it might collapse. A sense of suspicion spread through Maya's team. The reporters lowered their heads, furiously scribbling notes. A headline began to form. Betrayal from within. Bennett's team accused of betrayal. Maya couldn't speak. She stared at Marcus for a long time, her eyes filled with both questioning and disappointment. The feeling of being betrayed by someone she trusted hit like a slap in the face. Memories came flooding back. The coordination, the brief exchanges, those looks that seemed so sincere. Everything now collapsed, like sand beneath her feet. Emily slammed her hand on the table, jumping to her feet. We can't keep him here. Maya, he could have leaked all our legal strategies. All the evidence could be compromised if he's been involved. But Maya didn't react as expected. She furrowed her brow, her eyes no longer shocked but steadily turning into cold observation. Not yet. We wait. Wait for what? Emily ground her teeth. Wait another 12 hours. Maya said succinctly, without emphasis but with complete resolve. She walked out of the courtroom, leaving Emily staring after her with suppressed anger. Marcus was ordered to leave the premises, escorted quietly out of the building. Before stepping through the door, he paused and looked back. Don't you see, Maya? There are things that must be hidden to survive. His voice wasn't mocking nor pleading, just a vague question thrown back at her. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She sat at the desk, pulling up old mission logs, quick notes she had made during her undercover operation in Somalia. One line stood out, marked in red. A false traitor never lies. He tells half-truths. The glow of the laptop screen cast a cold light on her cheekbones as she opened the internal security software, accessing the surveillance footage from the strategy meeting room Marcus had frequently visited. In one corner of the screen, she saw something unusual. Once, Marcus intentionally dropped a file, positioning the camera directly at a report he had edited, exposing the words, "simulation file." The action was quick, almost clumsy, but repeated 3 times over 3 different days. Maya exhaled slowly. No one was stupid enough to leave evidence like that. Not 3 times. Unless they wanted to be seen. The door to the Millfield Hospital storage room creaked as Emily twisted the key sent anonymously in an unmarked envelope 3 days earlier. Maya stood behind, her gaze tight with focus, each step feeling as though she were walking deeper into the core of some covert operation. In the storage room, a medical file under the alias Jonathan Marsh lay neatly in the 8th drawer, just as the code Maya found on the tape Marcus had accidentally let slip in the internal camera. The file seemed legitimate until Maya peeled back the spine, revealing a thin silver hard drive wrapped tightly in anti-theft cloth. As she inserted the drive into the secure scanner, hundreds of files appeared. The data was intentionally organized. Payments from a residential development company, grant works, into the accounts of at least 12 officers in town, accompanied by maps of neighborhoods where black residents were being displaced through legal coercion. Emily opened another file titled Cleansing Zones, a plan to clear out residents under the pretext of building code violations, but in reality to hand over land to investors. An attached contract titled Main Route Area Protection Security Maintenance Fees was, essentially, a disguised invoice for money laundering through the local mafia. Maya stared at the screen, her face not showing outrage, but a quiet confirmation. The final recording was of Marcus. Brief, filmed secretly by a body-worn camera. In it, Sheriff Grant shook hands with a man in a black suit, his deep voice clear. "If Bennett keeps investigating, I'll make sure she's taken care of. Don't worry, I've got someone inside handling that." Maya slowly pushed her chair back, the pieces clicking together in her mind. Marcus's every move became clear. The calls he made after meetings, his indifferent stare when Emily exploded, the ambiguity in his answers. All of it was a facade designed to lead those watching him to believe he truly betrayed them. That afternoon, Marcus appeared at a derelict post office station near the outskirts. Maya and Emily were waiting, parked in a hidden alley. He stepped out, unarmed, unhesitant. Still in simple clothes, still that same look, but this time when he pulled a leather wallet from his jacket, inside was a high-ranking FBI agent ID. His voice was calm. "I'm a federal agent, embedded from the start of the operation. Mission: trace the money laundering chain tied to Millfield's law enforcement." Emily froze, but Maya wasn't surprised. Her gaze was as if she'd been waiting for confirmation. Marcus continued, "I had to be suspected to expose them. If I hadn't pretended to leak information, Cole wouldn't have set Kayla up. If I hadn't let myself be recorded, Grant wouldn't have been careless enough to talk right in the headquarters." He placed another folder on the peeling wooden desk, resting his hand on the edge. "I call it the Millfield Protocol. It's all part of a covert strategy to ethnically cleanse and restructure the population based on race, economic interests, and political control." Maya flipped to the first page, a list of neighborhoods marked for eradication. The next page was a list of internal staff who had been compensated. At the bottom was a torn note with the name Elias Harper. Next to it, "File closed, processed." Maya's breath caught. No more questions needed. She and Emily immediately transmitted the data through the FBI's secure channel. A confirmation signal was instantly sent from Washington headquarters. Before leaving the station, Maya looked at Marcus once more. "Next time, tell me sooner." He smiled faintly, his face etched with exhaustion. Only when I know you're strong enough to carry it. This morning's courtroom felt no different in terms of light or seating, but the atmosphere had changed. It was heavier, dense, as though someone had closed all the windows tightly, though they remained open. Those present seemed to realize today wasn't just a continuation, it was a turning point. Judge Robert Langford still sat straight-backed at the highest podium. From the very first day, he had never revealed a single hint of emotion, not even a nod or a soft cough. His silence had always conveyed that he stood outside the battle. But when Emily Carter stood up to present a file, Langford's eyes moved for the first time. He didn't look at the prosecutor or the defendant. His gaze was fixed on the first few lines of a confirmation memo from the FBI. Data extracted from Marcus's hard drive had been fully verified, matching other federal intelligence sources. Emily adjusted her glasses and spoke clearly. Your Honor, with this evidence, we have reasonable grounds to request a review of the entire arrest and indictment process for Maya Bennett, including its legality, motivations, and transparency in each procedural step. Langford didn't respond immediately. He placed the file aside and flipped through the arrest report from the day Maya was detained. His hand stopped at a section that had been edited 3 times in one single day. The name of the officer who had recorded the changes was faint, almost as if it had been tampered with. He didn't raise an eyebrow, nor did he frown. He simply held his silence a little longer, as if waiting for everything to form clearly in his mind. Then he looked up for the first time since the trial began. His voice was hoarse, slow, but powerful. I have a few questions. The media scrambled to take notes. The air in the room shifted immediately. Langford turned to the prosecution. Why is there no signed document from the defendant acknowledging her detention process? The prosecutor stood, stammering, flipping through papers, eyes darting quickly to her colleague, before reluctantly admitting, "We are searching for the original. It may have been misplaced during the transfer from the police department." Langford didn't react. He turned to the acting police chief. When the defendant's injuries were checked, who was the examining doctor? And why was there no independent doctor as required by protocol? This second question made the entire prosecution sit up straight. The police officer in the front row tried to respond evenly, but Langford stopped writing midway, looking up. "I'm not asking out of curiosity. I'm asking because of responsibility." He placed his hand on the wooden table, his gaze drilling into the officer. "I see that the defendant's request for private counsel was denied, but no official response has been submitted to this court. Who had the authority to deny this right, and on what ground?" This time, no one answered immediately. A dangerous silence swept across the room, creeping into every wooden seat and every spine. The media began recording things differently. This was no longer Maya against the system. It was the judge's seat, shifting away from its former silence. Maya remained still, her eyes tracking every movement of the man at the podium. Langford stayed silent for a few more seconds, then tapped his gavel lightly. While reviewing and verifying the legality of the procedures, he said, "The court declares a temporary suspension of Millfield Police Department's authority to provide evidence until independent confirmation from an external judicial agency is obtained." The words fell like a heavy stone, sending ripples throughout the room. A reporter dropped his pen. A lawyer for the prosecution stared at the desk, and murmurs began to rise. Robert Langford no longer looked at anyone. He lowered his head, wrote a few more lines, then closed the file. And when the last pair of eyes in the room was still trying to comprehend what had just happened, he stood up, leaving his seat with a message that didn't need to be spoken. The scales had begun to shift. The next morning, before the courtroom had even filled up, an announcement from the judge's office was posted on the door. The defense now had the right to submit documents directly to the court without needing validation through Millfield Police. A seemingly small procedural change, but in the current context, it was a sign of reversal. During the trial, Langford read excerpts from federal case law, his voice neither loud nor forceful, but clear in every word. He referenced Dawson v. Alabama, 1994, a case where a black defendant was denied a private attorney, and the conviction was overturned due to violation of constitutional rights. He emphasized that the court now had an obligation to ask questions when a citizen's basic rights were restricted through an opaque process. The final words he spoke made both sides understand that the situation had changed. If constitutional rights are stripped away in silence, then the law will be the first to fall into the abyss. The prosecution began to lose its rhythm. The lead prosecutor, once confident throughout the previous hearings, now repeatedly requested pauses. Questions that seemed settled now turned against them, as Emily requested the summoning of police officers who had worked with Cole. 3 were called back, and when cross-examined with new statements and an FBI recording, their previous testimonies began to contradict themselves. One stammered, one bowed his head, and the third requested to retract his statement, claiming to have been pressured by superiors. Langford showed no emotion, but his gaze shifted to one of greater intensity. He withdrew his questions, allowing the FBI full authority to present the developments of their covert investigation in the next session, without local vetting. At the same time, he convened a private meeting with the FBI representative, the state's judicial inspector, and 2 federal observers assigned to Millfield. The meeting was not made public, but the key details soon leaked to the press. Among them, Langford asked bluntly, "If this system is rotting from the core, does the court I'm sitting in still serve as a tribunal of justice, or has it become a stage for deceiving justice?" A few hours later, a decision from the state's Department of Justice was sent in an urgent form. A document with a red stamp confirmed part of the investigative authority in Millfield was temporarily transferred to federal forces, while the state inspector conducted an independent review of cases showing signs of misconduct. This was a strong blow not only to Cole, but to the entire Millfield executive system. It severed the ability to manipulate records, preventing any efforts to conceal or destroy evidence within the department. The reaction spread beyond the courtroom. State-level media began arriving, with many reporters who had previously ignored the Maya case now returning to report on the new developments. In the courthouse hallway, a group of Millfield residents stood silently, some holding signs that read, "Justice needs people who dare to question the system." When Langford left the courtroom, he walked down the quiet hallway, where Maya stood leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes fixed ahead. The 2 faced each other wordlessly. He paused for a moment, his gaze no longer cold as when Maya first entered the court, but now carrying a sense of acceptance and respect. He nodded slightly. Not long, not formal, but enough for Maya to understand he had stood for what was right, not because she was a skilled fighter, but because he saw what was rotting under the guise of the law. The scales of justice hadn't crashed, but they had tilted, and this time, that tilt opened a crack of light. Maya received the FBI's intervention notice on a cold morning. The justice official simply informed her that the FBI would be coming to collect documents and evidence. "This is no longer just about you," the official said without looking up. Maya remained silent, but a shift occurred within her. She was no longer just a victim. She had become the key to exposing those who manipulated and protected crime. The next day, Emily and Maya met with the FBI team. This wasn't a typical interrogation, but a collaboration to bring the case to light. Emily led the conversation, providing critical documents, redacted records, internal call recordings, and detailed information on Ryan Cole and the officers involved. She explained everything clearly, leaving nothing hidden. Millfield police didn't just mishandle Maya's case, they intentionally protected the traitor within their ranks, Emily said. This isn't just about Maya. It's a threat to justice in the whole system. The investigators listened without interrupting, realizing the complexity of the situation. They began preparing to uncover the corruption within the system. Maya stood outside, watching it all unfold. She was not a criminal in the FBI's eyes. They saw her as a credible witness. She knew she'd face challenges, but she was no longer alone. She was part of the truth's revelation. As the investigation began, she felt the shift. She no longer had to fight the system alone. The next day, the courtroom atmosphere was different. The tension was gone as FBI officials and new investigators entered, standing tall, unaffected by previous pressures. Maya walked in. no longer just the defendant, but an active part in dismantling the system. The judge read the new ruling. This case is no longer just about Maya Bennett. We will investigate misconduct across the system. Maya sat there, feeling the change in the air. She was no longer prey. She was the one holding the truth. When the trial ended, Maya didn't feel victorious, but she sensed new strength. The fight was no longer just about her. It was a battle between justice and those who had protected crime for too long. What Maya had sacrificed, what she had proven, was not just for her, but for everyone crushed under the manipulation of power. She knew this was only the beginning. Maya sat silently in the courtroom, feeling every second pass. What had started as a personal case had now turned into a full investigation into the system. The FBI's intervention meant her struggles were no longer just hers. She had become a key part in fighting widespread corruption. When the FBI announced they had gathered enough evidence to expand the investigation, the tension in the courtroom shifted immediately. Maya didn't need to do anything more. The documents she and Emily had provided were now weapons, ready to expose the manipulators. They were no longer just meaningless papers, but sharp tools cutting through corruption. Emily sat quietly beside Maya, observing the FBI's actions. Maya may still be the defendant in the eyes of the law, but the atmosphere had changed. The trial was no longer just about one individual's wrongdoing. It had shifted to the corruption within the Millfield police force. Evidence was continuously revealed, and former police colleagues began standing up, accusing their own of misconduct. Maya didn't feel satisfaction, just a rare sense of peace. For the first time in months, she didn't have to fight alone. The truth was no longer hidden, suffocated. The conspiracies she had sensed and endured were now exposed. The FBI didn't stop with low-level investigators. They pulled high-ranking officials into the investigation, those who had concealed cases, and swept them under the rug. These officials could no longer hide behind their power. They now faced tough questions from the FBI prosecutors, who weren't afraid to criticize them. Maya realized that the struggle wasn't just hers anymore. It was for the community, for those who refused to tolerate oppression, for those willing to stand up and speak the truth even when facing power. Though she wasn't the one suing, Maya had become an indispensable part of the fight. Throughout the trial, Maya showed no emotion. She was no longer a victim of an unjust system. She was a true warrior, not only protecting herself, but paving the way for others to continue the fight. Maya felt a new strength rising within her. Eye wishes were no longer needed. Tears appeared in her eyes as she thought about the terrible, but then reminiscent, pities, words that were no longer mean. The trial continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Voices of protest began rising. Those who once supported oppression and indifference began to doubt, and with each step of Maya, Emily, and the FBI, it was clear this was no longer one person's battle. It was the battle of all those who dared face dirty power, those who believed in justice and truth. The courtroom was unusually crowded. Though no one said it, everyone could feel something significant was about to happen. Ryan Cole and Anthony Grant sat at the defendant's table, indifferent and detached. Cole sat with his arms crossed, a half-smile of provocation on his face, while Grant flipped through documents, acting as if this trial were just another mundane meeting. The audience's eyes shifted nervously, some anxious, others expecting another manipulated verdict. The door swung open, and Maya entered, her back straight, eyes fixed on the witness stand. She didn't glance at Cole and Grant. Her boots echoed on the tiled floor, making the room fall silent. Behind her, Emily Carter and Marcus Lewis followed closely. Emily held a thick file, her face cold, eyes sharp with determination. Without wasting time, Emily stood when allowed by the judge. "We will present evidence showing that all charges against Maya Bennett were part of a fabricated scheme." She played the first video from the internal security camera, Maya being pushed to the ground without resistance, directly contradicting Cole's statement about a violent struggle. The room was silent, except for the faint sound of the recording. Next, Emily presented a medical report showing bruises on Maya's arms that didn't match Cole's description. Each piece of evidence landed with precision, like a well-aimed strike. The tension escalated when a video from Kayla Brooks was shown. In it, Kayla secretly filmed another arrest, following the same pattern. Cole and 2 other officers planting drugs, using racist language, and fabricating reports. Whispers filled the room, and Grant's expression hardened. Emily opened the hard drive left by Colonel Harper, revealing encrypted emails between Grant and a real estate figure, discussing how to clear minority neighborhoods through targeted arrests. Appointment schedules from a private app showed Grant and Cole had met at least 4 times outside of work to coordinate their actions. The room's atmosphere thickened and neutrality disappeared. Marcus stepped forward, holding a small recording device. He played a chilling recording of Grant's voice. "If that girl is still alive and goes to court, we lose everything. Do you understand, Ryan? Just make sure there's no trial." Some in the room held their breath. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus continued, presenting bank statements revealing large transfers from a construction firm previously investigated for money laundering. Names linked to the transactions, including a local assistant district attorney, were listed. This was no longer just a trial. It was a massive crack in the system. Cole jumped up, slamming his hands on the table. "You're making this up," he shouted, but no one reacted. Grant remained seated, his eyes briefly meeting Maya's before looking away. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The judge ordered order. Signaling to the security guards, Maya stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the judge's bench, where justice was no longer a formality. The judge adjusted his glasses and said to his legal assistant, "Contact the federal prosecutor's office, urgently." The room's air contracted, as if stretched to its breaking point. The back door opened, and 2 federal agents in black suits entered. Their arrival wasn't expected, but it felt as if it had been anticipated for a long time. Grant leaned toward the judge, his lips pressed, his eyes shifting to the agent reading the arrest warrant. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice low and guarded. The agent read the warrant aloud. "The arrest warrant issued by the Department of Justice, signed by the U.S. Attorney, is for Anthony Grant and Ryan Cole. The charges include falsifying evidence, witness intimidation, abuse of power, and conspiracy with a criminal organization to exploit local power." Cole sprang to his feet, knocking his chair aside. "We are the law in this town. Who do you think you are?" 2 agents quickly restrained him, pinning him to the table and cuffing his hands behind his back. His resistance only made him look more pathetic. Some people exhaled, others clapped softly, as if confirming that this moment had truly happened. Grant remained seated, his gaze empty as he stared at Maya, then stood up. Without a word, he walked between the agents, his once commanding presence now gone. Maya stood still in the corner, eyes still fixed on the judge. Her right hand gripped a small object in her jacket pocket, its cold metal symbolizing not her reputation, but her commitment to truth. The judge slammed his gavel, his voice cutting through the room. "The court orders the suspension of all operations of the Millfield Police Department for investigation. Until further notice, all law enforcement powers are transferred to federal authorities." No one stood immediately. People looked around, then quietly rose, as if they had witnessed something much bigger than a trial. The silence stretched, not fragmented, but a form of acknowledgement. The system had fallen, and this time it had fallen in the right direction. Outside, the rain had started. Water splashed onto the courthouse steps, the wind carrying the scent of wet pavement. Maya stepped out, her coat soaked, but her step steady. Emily followed, asking after a few moments of silence, "Are you okay?" Maya didn't answer right away. She looked at Millfield's square, once the center of her fears, and down at the recorder in her hand. She opened it, letting the final sound echo. "I didn't come back to win. I came back to end it." She turned it off. The wind blew again, sweeping away the echoes of a trial, a collapse, and a new beginning. The main gate of the Millfield Police Department was sealed with red and white ribbons, accompanied by a sign reading, "Operation suspended due to federal investigation." Inside, everything was silent, a stark contrast to the bustle the locals had known. Neutral officers, those not directly involved but who had remained silent for too long, were reassigned. The parking lot behind the building was empty, tire marks faint on the damp ground. In the town center, the atmosphere was a mix of relief and quiet tension. Some felt as if they had just escaped an invisible haunt, but no one celebrated. Others were still in denial, their eyes avoiding the names of those arrested. They dared not defend them, nor could they figure out what to oppose. The collapse of trust had made even everyday neighborly conversations hesitant. The community divided quietly. Families who had once been victims of police abuse walked the streets with anxious glances. Their wariness now came not from the fear of arrest, but from becoming the focus of uncertain looks. On the other hand, the families of the arrested officers faced heavy pressure. Their children were shunned at school, their spouses received doubtful stares at the supermarket and church, silent cracks ran through every street. Media from neighboring states arrived, asking questions and filming every expression in town hall meetings. But most of Millfield's residents remained silent. They had seen too many empty promises, too many trials where the truth was distorted. Now they simply watched, waiting to see if this time would be different. A special committee was established within 5 days of the trial, consisting of representatives from the FBI, state government, and randomly selected citizens. The first decision was to halt new recruitments and reopen all case files from the past 5 years. A list of hundreds of cases was printed and categorized, including criminal and civil cases and dismissed complaints. Millfield began its internal self-examination. Amid this process, a few voices began to rise from places previously silent. Mr. Turner, a high school teacher, opened a class on legal awareness for students, asking, "What is justice when faced with prejudice?" The priest at St. James Church held a prayer session, inviting those who had been shunned. A bookstore put up a sign, "If you've been harmed by the system, you may borrow books for free." Small but meaningful movements, like water slowly soaking into dry earth. Maya stayed in Millfield a bit longer. She declined all interviews and speaking engagements. She was seen unexpectedly in schoolyards, at the cafe where the owner had been falsely accused by the police, or in front of the house of a black man who lost his job after filing a complaint against Grant. She wore no badge or uniform, and her visits had no speeches, just nods, attentive glances, and a silence that made people feel safe. One afternoon, Maya stood behind the church, looking through the frosted glass where students were discussing law and citizenship. She didn't go inside. A soldier didn't need to stand on a high podium to make an impact. All it took was standing close enough to listen and far enough so they could rise on their own. The Millfield Town Hall held its first session after the crisis, with no closed doors and no silent nods from those who had long manipulated the system. The meeting was broadcast live, with bilingual translation and third-party legal oversight. A police reform program was announced, with training led by federal experts including psychologists, human rights lawyers, and even former victims of abuse. The modules were designed to teach officers how to handle confrontations without escalating to violence. New recruits were selected through an independent evaluation by a civilian board, including representatives from different ethnic groups and Millfield residents. Each recruit underwent 3 months of training, followed by quarterly evaluations during their first year. An open data portal was launched for citizens to look up case files and results. A hotline allowed people to report violations anonymously. Public meetings were held monthly, with summaries sent to every household. These steps did not erase old wounds, but soothed the system's burns, preventing them from festering. Beneath the surface, quiet but profound changes took place. Kayla Brooks, a young woman who had testified, received a full scholarship from a civil rights organization. On the day she left, dozens of people saw her off at the bus station, including the family of a former officer who had denied her account. A family wrongfully evicted had their property restored. They wrote Maya a handwritten letter, filled with gratitude. In cafes, the wary glances lessened when a black person entered. No more whispers, no more quick glances. Shops began hiring based on ability, not customer suitability. Schools taught equality and practical law, asking students, if you were wrongfully controlled, how would you respond and why? Maya left Millfield on a rainless morning, silently, without any farewell. Before leaving, she visited the small cemetery south of town where Colonel Elias Harper's gravestone lay. She stood for a moment, placing a silver veteran's tag on the stone, her gaze deep enough to make time seem to pause. As Maya's car left Millfield, she passed streets being repainted and new signs replacing old, rotting ones. Not everything was perfect, but the most important thing had begun. The people had begun to look up, straight ahead. Justice, in the end, did not come from a verdict, but from those who dared to live on every day with the right choice. The naval base on the eastern shore welcomed Maya back with the familiar taste of salty air and curt nods of greeting. She stood in the training field, a backpack slung over her shoulder, sunlight casting down on the dark uniform that had seen her through many battlefields. The old soldiers, her comrades who had stood by her on countless missions, were still there. They nodded, some offering firm handshakes, but their brief glances carried a trace of unspoken wariness. They had read what the media said, heard the exaggerated stories, but no one dared to ask her directly. Maya didn't blame them. She had once been one of them, a soldier who knew how to act in silence, avoid the spotlight, follow orders, and live by the belief that skills were everything. Millfield made her realize that some battles couldn't be fought with weapons. At times, silence was complicity, and speaking out might be the most dangerous action one could choose. A few days later, she was invited to meet with Senior Command. The man, his hair streaked with gray, didn't ask pleasantries. He simply looked at her for a moment and then said, I want you to share your experience from Millfield. What happened there, I believe, will be valuable for future officers. Maya nodded and told everything in a calm, clear voice, without embellishment. She explained how she observed, kept her composure, and understood a system broken at its core. Small actions, standing still in the courtroom, activating the recorder at the right moment, letting someone else speak, were all strategies, not to win, but to preserve herself. The commander didn't interrupt, nodding a few times, then closed the folder without opening it. When the meeting ended, he shook her hand. You're not just a good soldier. You've proven that some battlegrounds require more than guns. Maya returned to the base, but it no longer felt like home. The corridors, the meals in the mess hall, the morning drills, they were all the same, but something inside her had changed. Before, the base felt like shelter, like a cog in a well-oiled machine. Now, it felt like she had drifted off course. She remembered the woman's gaze at the Millfield grocery store, the firm handshake of a boy by the church, the whispered thanks from a man wronged by a false conviction. Those moments left deeper scars than any she had carried before. Some suggested interviews. Others offered to help her write a memoir. Maya politely declined. Thank you, but I must decline. She spoke out not to become an icon, but because no one else would. One afternoon, she walked along the seawall. The familiar salty air filled her lungs. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of waves fill the silence in her heart. If anyone truly needs to know what happened, they'll figure it out. My job is to move forward, she told herself. Then, like every soldier before her, she turned toward the setting sun and walked on to new missions. Millfield didn't hold a celebration for Maya, but her name endured. In local meetings, people referenced the trial as a reminder of responsibility. At Millfield High School, the new principal began a citizenship course with the question, if you face injustice, will you remain silent or act like Maya Bennett? The students raised their heads for the first time. Maya's name wasn't glorified, but it became a standard for living, knowing when to be patient and when to speak out. Her calmness, brief words, and unwavering gaze in the face of prejudice created a weight that didn't need promotion. At the East Community Center, Emily Carter continued offering free legal training, and Kayla Brooks spoke at anti-prejudice events. Every story they told carried a part of Maya's strength. The last morning at the base, Maya wrote a letter to Evelyn, never sent, about forgiveness and strength. She put on her uniform, nodding at her reflection. The seal insignia was a reminder, not to boast, but to remember where she had been. She left the base, stepping quietly into a new life, but her actions and her spirit remained quietly and persistently.